Imagine this. A decorated general, the Lion of the Rif, they called him, eve of a huge offensive in Spain.
Right.
His whole mission depends on him flying this tiny little plane, a two-seater, from Lisbon to Burgos to take command.
Okay.
But he refuses. He will not take off without his general's uniforms, all of them, risking everything.
His uniforms. You're kidding.
Nope. His pilot, Major Ansaldo, is practically begging him, leave the trunks, it's not safe.
I can imagine.
And the general, he says, Spain comes first, and Spain needs me more than I need my uniforms. There's only one San Giorgio.
Wow. That's quite a statement. Hubris, maybe.
Or picture this. A young American woman, Peggy Drews. She's playing bridge in a fancy spa town in Czechoslovakia, hours before the bombs fall.
Okay.
And she's just dismissing the whole idea, saying things like, oh, we already had one war this century. Wasn't that enough?
Famous last words, almost.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And then the bombs fell. The world was already on fire, wasn't it? In ways people just weren't seeing.
Or refused to see. Absolutely.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are plunging into a really fascinating stack of material. It challenges how we think about this pivotal moment in history. A world just teetering on the edge of another global war. You can feel the echoes of the last one, but also hear these terrifying sounds of a new kind of conflict.
Yeah, it's a complex picture.
So this deep dive will look at the Spanish Civil War,
Yeah.
the invasion of Czechoslovakia, the brutal early days of the wider European war, and even tensions simmering way out in the Far East.
It's a global snapshot, really.
You'll hear about these astonishing decisions, harrowing experiences, soldiers, civilians, everyone caught up in it, and just the very human reactions to pressure you wouldn't think possible. How quickly the unthinkable just becomes normal.
And our mission today is really to unpack all these sources, pull out the key insights, and help you, the listener, really get a feel for what it was like as these dominoes started to fall, often in ways that, well, they don't always fit our neat historical narratives.
Okay, let's start back in Spain then, with General San Giorgio, the Lion of the Rif. Big reputation. About to lead this rising against the Republic.
And as you said, the uniform incident, it's bizarre.
His aide apparently insisted, saying something like, on the eve of his victorious march into Madrid, he can't arrive without uniforms.
Image is everything, I suppose. Even then.
And the pilot, Ansaldo, he's described as visibly nervous, lighting a cigarette, basically saying, please don't die before we get there.
High stakes.
And San Giorgio's response, Spain comes first. Spain needs me. There's only one San Giorgio. It just speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It really does. And what's striking, I think, is the contrast with the leader who did eventually emerge, Franco.
Right.
Ansaldo apparently dismissed Franco later, said he had all the warmth, all the excitement of a canceled postage stamp.
Right.
So you have San Giorgio, this figure obsessed with his image, his singular importance, and then Franco, seen as maybe brave, sure, but lacking that kind of theatrical flair.
So a real difference in style.
Exactly. One very image-driven, the other maybe more pragmatic, understated. It just shows how these perceptions, even charisma, could shape things right at the start, how big historical moments can pivot on these really human quirks.
That's a great point. Okay, so from the generals down to the ground level, the sources give us this raw look at the American volunteers, the Lincoln Battalion.
Yeah, people like Chaim Weinberg, Mike Carroll, they went there to fight fascism, idealists.
But the reality they found? It was grim. They were described as scrawny and hungry, filthy, lousy, just awful conditions.
And constant danger, shelling all the time. Whereas the source says a few people on both sides would get maimed or killed, but it didn't really change anything strategically, just attrition.
And that led to, well, disillusionment, didn't it?
A creeping disillusionment, yes. You hear Chaim Weinberg asking pretty bluntly, who gives a shit about Spain now? Stalin's forgotten all about it.
Powerful words.
But even with that political abandonment, the fight was still brutally real for them. You had figures like Milton Wolf, El Lobo, the wolf, the Spaniards called him.
Right, a key figure.
Absolutely critical for morale. And when he got hit, the description of the rush to evacuate him, everyone scrambling for the blood truck, it shows how deeply personal it still was, even if the bigger cause felt lost.
And it seems like language barriers didn't stop the swearing. Chaim found he could cuss in, what, half a dozen languages?
English, Yiddish, Spanish, Catalan, German, French, Russian. He apparently said talk without swearing felt like food without salt and pepper.
Huh. A universal language, maybe.
It sort of speaks to that shared, raw expression under extreme stress, doesn't it? But there was a more serious observation from the Americans, too. about the Spanish soldiers themselves.
What was that?
They noted that Spaniards didn't keep proper lookout, they didn't like digging trenches, they didn't bother cleaning their weapons unless somebody screamed at them, and sometimes not even then.
Despite being brave.
Yeah, incredibly brave on both sides, apparently. But it highlights that gap you often see between the ideological passion and the disciplined nuts and bolts of soldiering.
And on the other side, the nationalists. The sources paint a pretty ruthless picture.
Chillingly so. Commanders like Major Uribe shouting, "Viva la muerte!" Long live death.
Rim.
And their methods for dealing with deserters, bashing skulls with bricks, hangings. It underscores the sheer barbarity of that conflict, a terrifying preview of what was coming elsewhere.
And adding to the chaos spies. Everywhere.
Yeah, that quote from the sergeant is telling. Sometimes I think every fourth guy in Spain is a spy for one side or the other, or maybe both. It just paints this picture of deep, deep mistrust. Loyalty was a dangerous idea.
So while Spain is burning, the pressure is building elsewhere. In Czechoslovakia, that seems to be where the storm really breaks in our sources.
Absolutely. And Hitler's reaction to the assassination of Henlein, the Sudeten German leader, it's astonishing.
What did he say?
He apparently blurted out, "Ich bin vom Himmel gefallen," which means basically, "I've fallen from heaven."
Like it was a gift.
Exactly. He immediately saw it as his casus belli, his excuse for war against Czechoslovakia. Even though he admitted he hadn't arranged it himself.
Why admit that?
He apparently thought if he had arranged it, it would have looked too raw, too unlikely for anyone to swallow. So he used this event, linked Czechs to murder, brought up Franz Ferdinand from 1914.
Oh, invoking the Great War.
Claiming the Slavs have done it again. It just shows how leaders can grab onto almost anything, twist history to justify aggression.
And Chamberlain and Daladier. The British and French leaders.
Our sources say they just gaped at him. Disbelief. But despite the reservations, they eventually told Hitler, peace and war lie entirely in your hands, honoring their commitments but putting the onus on him.
A high-stakes diplomatic gamble.
Which failed, obviously. And then the German military machine starts rolling. The 3rd Panzer Division moving to the Czech frontier, engineers laying out white tapes. Battle set for 0600.
But it wasn't easy going at first.
No, the sources describe rugged terrain, strong Czech forts, fierce resistance, machine guns, anti-tank guns. The Germans were actually surprised.
Really?
Yeah, one German Lancer that's just a common soldier almost pissed himself when a bullet cracked past his ear. He realized the Czechs were playing for keeps, all right? It shows that underestimation of the defenders.
And there were tensions within the Czech army, too.
Definitely. Through the eyes of Václav Ježek, we see this mistrust towards the Slovaks, like Jan Zorinda. Lots of desertions from Slovaks who apparently didn't think this was their fight.
So internal fractures weakening the defense.
Precisely. And then the civilian impact. It was immediate and terrifying. Remember Peggy Druce, the American playing bridge?
Yeah, the one who thought another war was impossible.
Well, bombs start falling at 6 a.m. The spa town smells like rotten eggs from the waters being hit. The sound of artillery makes her scream. Total chaos.
Horrifying.
Clinics are instantly overwhelmed. Peggy herself ends up carrying stretchers, and you get these chilling details like hotels putting up signs, "We have locked up our Germans." Just instant suspicion and fear of what happens when the Nazis rolled in.
Shows how fast things descended.
Absolutely. The normalization of brutality happens terrifyingly quickly.
Now, you mentioned something earlier that surprised me in the sources, the Russian connection in Czechoslovakia. What do we find there?
Yeah, it's not often highlighted. The sources talk about Soviet volunteers, like a Lieutenant Sergei Yaroslavsky, flying bomber missions for the Czechs.
Flying Soviet planes?
Presumably. But the internal dynamics for them were tense. The purges were ongoing back home, so pilots had to be really careful what they said. Even complaining about poor radio quality could be dangerous.
Constant paranoia, even while fighting a war.
Right. And their missions. Bombing German positions in Czech cities like Brno, even hitting near Prague, causing significant civilian casualties, it seems.
And propaganda was part of it, too.
Oh, yes. German planes dropped leaflets over Prague, showing the city in flames while, quote, Jewish-looking men labeled France and England played the violin. Really vicious stuff.
Just stark. But despite all that, the Czechs kept fighting.
They did! Fighting on in the ruins. The sources suggest it was maybe the courage of despair. Like they were saying, if you want us, come and get us. Come pay the butcher's bill. A really powerful image of resistance against overwhelming odds.
So Czechoslovakia falls, and the war just spreads like wildfire.
Yeah.
Where do the sources take us next?
To the Low Countries, Belgium and the Netherlands. The invasion there is marked by the appearance of the Waffen-SS, Hitler's elite troops.
Described as storm crows.
Yeah, one the soldier says they don't show up till something's about to pop. Their arrival was a bad omen.
And the Dutch and Belgian attempts at neutrality, they failed spectacularly.
Miserably. British Sergeant Alistair Walsh, a WWII vet in our sources, calls them a pack of goddamn fools. His captain is even more blunt about King Leopold of Belgium.
What did he say?
Apparently, Leopold thinks the French are as bad as the Germans, thinks we are, for Christ's sake. Just a total misreading of the situation.
And that had consequences on the ground.
Huge consequences. Civilians started fleeing, creating this massive traffic jam, a complete mess, one source calls it. It completely blocked Allied troop movements.
So their neutrality, or their mistrust, actually hindered the defense.
Actively sabotaged it, you could argue. Turned the civilian exodus into a tactical nightmare for the Allies.
And the air war.
Brutal from the start. Stukas dive bombing, strafing refugees, troops. Walsh remembered strafing from WWII, but said this felt much more horrid or dangerous.
A new level of terror from the skies.
Definitely. The RAF eventually joined in, Hurricanes fighting Messerschmitts, but the impact on civilians was devastating. A dark sign of things to come.
Let's talk about the soldier's experience. Walsh, the British veteran. What did he observe?
He describes the sound of bullets hitting flesh, that wet, slapping noise. Horrible detail. And his comment about strafing in 1918 not seeming nearly so horrid compared to now. It captures that cynical veteran's view. War is always awful, but somehow it keeps getting worse.
And we see it from the German side, too, through Willy Dernan.
Yeah, his account is incredibly raw. He admits he came that close to pissing himself when his buddy Klaus got hit in the stomach. He remembers the shrieking smell of blood, like hot iron, and, well, other bodily fluids, too. It's visceral. The immediate trauma.
Were there tensions within the German ranks?
Yeah.
About the SS, for instance?
Oh, yeah. Ludwig Roth, a panzer commander, wasn't keen on the Waffen-SS, saw them as Himmler trying to encroach upon the regular army, the Wehrmacht. Even if they fought like mad bastards, he didn't like it.
Interesting. And others.
Theo Hassbach, a radio man, just hoped our own side wouldn't cause them trouble. But amidst all this, you see soldiers finding small comforts. Alcohol, coffee, stolen cigarettes, trading insults.
Dark humor and camaraderie.
Exactly. Trying to stay human, find some relief in the middle of hell. It's that duality of war again.
And sometimes that tension spilled over in unexpected ways.
Yeah.
Like with the French barman.
Yeah, the one-eyed barman, Claude. Willy Dernan describes this scene where a German corporal, Arno Batz, gets drunk and abusive.
Away.
And Claude, the barman, just blinked his good eye, then he swung, hit Batz right on the button with a noise like a cleaver smacking into a frozen side of beef.
Knocked him out cold.
Stone cold. It's just this little flashpoint showing the resentment simmering right below the surface during occupation.
Incredible story. Now, France's defense, heavily reliant on the Maginot Line, right? But there was frustration.
Deep frustration. Sergeant Demange, in our sources, feels like France is still fighting the last war, the Kaiser's army. He talks about the curse of winning, meaning their WWII victory made them strategically rigid.
Fighting the new war with old tactics.
Exactly. Overconfident, unable to adapt to the speed of the German blitzkrieg. You see it in the Ardennes, where Czech soldiers like Václav Žižek are just shoved into positions in terrain he thought was insane for an attack.
And even the uniforms looked outdated.
Yeah, the French uniforms, though updated since 1918, looked old-fashioned next to the German ones. The source says the Germans seemed streamlined, almost like oncoming diesel locomotives. A powerful visual metaphor for the difference in approach.
And the French civilians wanted to join the fight.
Some did, yeah, with old hunting rifles, varmint guns. But Demange had to disarm them.
Why?
Because of the Nazi policy on Frankführer's irregular fighters. They'd shoot hostages in retaliation. Demange mentions his own cousin being shot for that back in 1914, a brutal calculation civilians and soldiers had to make.
But there were still moments of French success, fleeting ones.
There were. One source describes a French tank knocking out a German command vehicle. Suddenly, the other German tanks are disorganized, milling about.
A small victory.
And Demange tries to rally his men, shouting, "It was like this in the summer of 18 too. If we hit him a good lick, we'll get him." Clinging to that past WWII spirit, even as this new reality was unfolding.
So, while Europe is ablaze on land, the war has other dimensions. What about the war at sea?
Right, it wasn't just tanks and planes. We get a glimpse into the U-boat war through Lieutenant Julius Lemp commanding U-30 in the Baltic.
And he had opinions on the new subs.
He certainly did. Calls a new design the ugliest goddamn thing I've ever seen. Looks like the boat's got a heart on.
Very blunt.
It gives you that human perspective on these technological developments. He also dreaded the idea of Q-ships, those disguised merchant ships that hunted U-boats in the last war. That fear lingered.
And the burden of command
Weighed heavily on him. He felt the entire boat, the crew, rested on his shoulders like Atlas carrying the world. It's a powerful reminder of the psychological stress on these commanders in that silent, deadly underwater war.
Okay, let's shift focus now, way beyond Europe. The sources also take us to the Far East. What was happening there?
Tensions were definitely flaring. We get a Japanese perspective from Sergeant Hideki Fujita, stationed near the Halha River, on the border with Mongolia.
Border clashes.
Frequent clashes with Mongolians and Russians, and according to Fujita, the enemy hold the high ground and had more tanks and better artillery. Not an easy posting.
And the conditions.
Brutal Manchurian weather, snow, biting wind. Plus, they were facing forced evacuations from some areas, leading to soldiers asking, if we leave, where do we go next? Back to Japan? You sense a real feeling of being stuck, maybe even despair.
Meanwhile, there were U.S. Marines in China.
Yep, in Peking. Figures like Pete McGill, Herman Salk, Max Weinstein, their orders were clear. Avoid trouble with the Japanese.
But they had strong opinions.
Very strong and very cynical. They used incredibly offensive, racist language for the Japanese and didn't think much of the Russians either. It shows that kind of dehumanizing talk was pervasive on all sides.
And what about the bigger picture? U.S. involvement.
Well, economically, it was complicated. A Japanese officer, Lieutenant Hanafusa, notes that the Americans go right on selling us fuel oil and scrap metal no matter what's happening in China.
Selling to Japan while Japan is invading China.
Astonishing, isn't it? It shows how economic ties could temporarily override the political situation, foreign policy full of contradictions as the world slid towards war.
And China itself was divided.
Deeply. Chiang Kai-shek versus Mao Zedong. One of the Marines, Max Weinstein, actually argues that Mao was more focused on China itself, unlike Chiang. And, of course, the sources mention the Marines finding escape, however crudely, with local women. Soldiering realities.
Let's bring it back to Germany now. Life for civilians under the Nazi regime, particularly for Jewish people. We revisit Sarah Goldman in Münster.
And the restrictions she faced were severe. Her family's Jewish soccer team had to play on this miserable field. Jews weren't allowed in the main bomb shelters.
Because the Germans wouldn't save them.
The source is chillingly blunt. If the Germans saved their own kind and watched Jews get blown to ground round, they would go out and have a beer afterwards to celebrate. Just sickening indifference.
Her father was a WWII veteran with an Iron Cross.
Yes, Samuel Goldman. He knew veteran status offered some slight protection, but he deliberately didn't draw attention to it because of his son, Saul. The impossible choices people had to make constantly.
And the story about Saul. It seems almost impossible. A Jewish man in the Wehrmacht.
It's an incredible detail, isn't it?
Yeah.
The sources suggest the Nazis simply wouldn't believe it was possible because their own propaganda insisted Jews were nothing but a pack of cowards.
So reality contradicted their own ideology.
Profoundly. It shatters that monolithic image of Nazi control and reveals these messy, contradictory human stories underneath. And amidst it all, Sarah's father finds this dark humor.
What does he say?
Moms don't care for Jews. Bombs can fall on Gestapo headquarters, too. Halavai. That Yiddish word, if only. A tiny spark of defiant hope through grim humor.
And Peggy Drews, the American woman. We find her in Berlin later.
Yes, wartime Berlin. Experiencing shortages, she describes scotch tasting more like oven cleaner, and the surprise air raids. A German naval officer she knows, Reinberger, never dreamt they could be Russian bombers hitting Berlin.
The war coming home in unexpected ways.
Exactly. And Peggy witnesses something truly awful. SS men attacking a Jewish butcher, Rothstein, cutting his beard with pinking shears, assaulting him.
Just brutal.
She describes the look in Rothstein's eyes as a million years old, capturing generations of persecution in that one moment. Peggy herself ends up interned, relocated. She shows defiance, telling an official where he could go, somewhere with a mighty warm climate.
Good for her.
Yeah.
But still under strict control.
Yeah, movement restricted to prevent espionage. Her story really brings home the casual cruelty and the tightening grip of the state.
So as the war grinds on, we see this clash between propaganda and the grim reality.
Very clearly. Soviet radio boasts about overfulfillment of the norms, while Lieutenant Yaroslavsky knows the reality. The Rasputitsa, the mud season, has grounded the entire Red Air Force.
And that makes him question things.
Deeply. He thinks, if that newsman was lying about the weather in Minsk, what else was he lying about? Once you spot a few lies, you start questioning everything. That erosion of trust is so important.
And on the German side, similar disconnect.
Same thing. Official propaganda talks about encircling Russia in a ring of steel, but privately, some soldiers admit it's a ring with gaps so big would fall off your finger pretty damn quick.
Military tactics were evolving too, right? Alongside the trauma.
Constantly. We see Hans Ulrich Rudel, the Stupa ace, preferring milk to booze or pills. Makes him an oddity, the White Crow and his squadron. Interesting personal detail.
And weapon systems had flaws.
Oh, yes. The Bf-110 destroyer planes turned out to be surprisingly vulnerable in dogfights. Forced the Luftwaffe to rethink strategy, maybe shift more to night bombing despite the cost. Constant adaptation was key.
And the psychological cost.
Immense. Willie Durnan's nightmares about his dying friend. Rudel, despite his success, realizing that anyone who enjoys combat at Dummkopf is a fool. Even the best soldiers knew the horror.
Did the relationship between officers and enlisted men change compared to WWI?
There seems to have been an effort. Hitler promised things would be different from the raw deal enlisted men got in the Great War. More recognition, medals like the Iron Cross First Class going to guys like Diesel Horst, building morale maybe.
And soldiers enduring terrible wounds, yet returning.
Yes, the phantom pain of lost limbs is mentioned. Men like Theo Hossbach, missing finger joints, volunteering to go back as a radio man in a Panzer II, needing just a jar of those little white pills. Incredible resilience, or maybe just grim necessity to keep the ranks filled.
And the equipment differences remain stark.
Very much so. Panzer IIs, basically training tanks, still being used against proper enemy tanks, and those French uniforms looking old-fashioned next to the streamlined Germans, that visual really sticks.
And finally, that quote from Alistair Walsh.
The front was Paris. It just sums it up, doesn't it? The war wasn't just at the front line. It permeated everything, everywhere, no escape.
Yet even in that, soldiers found tiny moments of contentment.
Yeah, Walsh observes a soldier happy with a smoke, some wine, a tin of food, happy as a sheep in clover, finding satisfaction in the absolute basics. That human need for tiny moments of peace, even in chaos.
So, wrapping this up, what really stands out from this deep dive for me is how personal it all was. How individual choices, sometimes irrational ones like a general's vanity or a civilian's disbelief, had these huge consequences.
Absolutely. And the speed at which the unthinkable just became normal. The blurring lines between civilian and soldier, the clash between propaganda and reality, the erosion of trust, it's all incredibly powerful.
So what does this mean for us listening today? I think this deep dive really forces us to think about leadership in crisis. Is it the showman or the quiet pragmatist?
That's a great question, and it makes you reflect on human adaptability, for better or worse, how quickly we can normalize horror. And maybe the provocative thought to leave with is this: when does that resilience, that adaptability start to look like complicity? And how much of that capacity to adapt or perhaps ignore is still in us now?